It's a cold Tuesday here in Seoul. Hello, I'm Lee Ji-yoon. Coming up on today's edition of Business Daily. Korean households spend more than $7 billion overseas in the third quarter of this year on the back of increasing number of people traveling abroad. Is Korea in need of more currency swap deals with major economies as a way of coping with growing uncertainties in and outside of the country? We'll sit down with an expert to talk about this. The economy might not be in its best shape right now, but that didn't stop Koreans from spending money overseas. In fact, latest numbers show that Koreans spent a record amount in the third quarter as more people traveled outside of the country using low-cost carriers. Our Shin Se-min reports.
For a single 3-month period, it's the largest amount of money ever spent by Koreans in other countries. The Bank of Korea says households' overseas spending during the July to September period topped 8 trillion won, roughly $7 billion for the first time. That's nearly 17% higher than the figure tallied during the same period last year and an increase of more than 23% on quarter. It's also the first time overseas spending has topped 4% of an average household's total consumption. The ratio of overseas spending to total consumption has been on a steady rise since the 1990s, when it hovered in the 1% range. Since the 2000s, the figure floated around the 3% range. Last year, households' overseas spending reached a record $22 billion, and it's forecast to keep rising on the back of increased outbound trips to foreign countries. The total includes purchases on goods in foreign countries and money spent on studying abroad, but excludes direct overseas purchases. The number of Koreans who traveled abroad surpassed 6 million in the third quarter, up more than 20% compared to the same period last year. Overseas travel has been increasingly popular in Korea as travelers take advantage of cheaper international flights offered by budget airlines. Shin Se-min, Business Daily.
The Korean government has decided to allocate more than 2/3 of next year's budget expenditure to the first half of the year in a bid to revitalize the economy and create momentum for growth. At a cabinet meeting on Tuesday, officials decided the funds will be allocated by ministry and by quarter. And under the plan, 68% of the $290 billion budget will be spent in the first half of the year, with $105 billion in the first quarter and $92 billion in the second quarter. The government decided to spend the funds in the first half so that the public can feel the effects of the stimulus. It has also given priority to projects focused on creating more jobs and infrastructure for public safety, as well as social overhead capital. And moving on to markets, Korean shares ended higher on Tuesday, brushing off concerns about increased economic uncertainties from Italy's no vote in a referendum on constitutional reform. Korea's benchmark Kospi rose 1.35% to end at 1989.86, while the tech-heavy Kosdaq also rose a little over 1% to end at 581.35. The Korean currency finished at 1,171.41 against the U.S. dollar. As for global markets, Italy's referendum seems to have had little impact on them as well, with Italy's benchmark FTSE MIB edging down 0.2%, while the Pan-European Stock 600 closed 0.6% higher than the previous trading session. And overnight, Wall Street also brushed aside the news out of Rome, while the Dow Jones Industrial Average finished 0.2% higher, hitting a record high of 19,216.24. The S&P 500 advanced 0.6% and the tech-heavy Nasdaq 1%. Despite the protracted sluggish economy, the burden on the public for tax payments and Social Security contributions continues to rise. Our Lee Ju-young tells us more.
Korea's total tax revenue to gross domestic product has surpassed the 25% mark for the first time last year. According to the OECD, this ratio, which includes taxes, pensions, and other Social Security contributions, reached 25.3% as of the end of 2015, up 0.7 percentage points from the previous year. On the global scale, though, the tax revenue burden that people bear is low compared to other OECD member countries. While Denmark has the highest ratio of 46.6%, Korea ranks fourth from the bottom, followed by Ireland, Chile, and Mexico. But what's alarming experts is just how fast that figure is growing. The OECD says in 2014, Korea's total tax revenue grew over 9% on year, and the per capita tax burden also rose almost 9% from the previous year, about 4 times higher than the OECD average. Experts say as countries around the world increase their spending on welfare, the public tax revenue burden is also expected to rise for the time being, especially as the government tries to deal with the rapidly aging population and low birth rate. Lee Ju-young, Business Daily.
Currency swap deals enable countries to exchange equivalent sums of money in different currencies to help countries better prepare for turbulences in financial markets. And Asian countries have been using these currency swap deals to avoid excessive dependence on the U.S. dollar. Now, currently, Korea has agreements in place with 5 countries, including China and Australia. And also back in August, Korea and Japan agreed to restart talks on a currency swap, which expired last year, raising hopes for a renewed deal. But now, with the latest political scandal involving President Park Geun-hye and the top office rattling the nation, Japan's finance minister has said that negotiations have stalled due to political uncertainties here in Korea. Take a look.
In a surprise move, Korea and Japan agreed to resume negotiations for a currency swap deal back in August as part of their efforts to strengthen bilateral economic relations amid uncertainties in the global financial market. This came as good news for Korea as there had been growing calls for Seoul to expand such agreements with major economies to improve access to liquidity in case of a financial crisis. In fact, the Seoul-Tokyo currency swap, which had been in place from 2001 to 2015, had been regarded an effective tool in minimizing volatility in the won-yen exchange rate. But last Friday, Japan's Finance Minister Taro Aso said talks about resuming a swap deal have virtually ground to a halt due to Korea's political turmoil. So with the current power vacuum in the country's economic leadership, will Korea be able to expand its currency swap schemes, including with Japan?
And for more on this, Professor Yang Jun-suk from the Catholic University of Korea joins us in the studio today. Great to have you here.
Happy to be here.
So obviously the Korean economy is faced with numerous external and internal uncertainties right now. And with that, do you think more currency swaps will actually help the Korean economy in some way or another?
Well, I think it can be very useful. Now, currency swaps, along with foreign exchange reserves, are usually used to try to prevent financial crisis, foreign exchange crisis.
Right.
And the reason it does that is, well, foreign exchange rate crisis we think happens because, well, the lenders who lent foreign currency to Korea, dollars or other hard currencies, if they see that Korea is in trouble and they may not be able to pay those hard currency back, they try to take their money as quickly out of the country as possible, while Korea at least has some hard currency left. So now if you have a lot of hard currency through foreign exchange rate reserves or through currency swaps, they'll be convinced that they can get their dollars or hard currency out, so they won't be as eager to get their money out and start a financial crisis.
Now, currently, Korea has 5 currency swap deals in place. Can you tell us more about them?
Okay, well, we have currency swaps with China, UAE, Australia, Indonesia, and with other APEC coalition, and that's called Chiang Mai Initiative, and that's about $110 billion depending on the current exchange rate, because we have currency swaps with the domestic currencies of these countries. You want to have currency swaps with countries which are not likely to go with financial crisis at the same time as you. So given those standards, some of the countries are actually relying on Korea to get them out of the financial crisis, and some of the countries, Korea is relying on them to get out of the financial crisis. So in that sense, not all currency swaps are the same.
Then what about Japan? I mean, like we heard in the report, Japan and Korea actually agreed to restart negotiations over a currency swap deal back in August. But now Japan have in effect come to a halt. It has announced that the negotiations are coming to a halt. So why so?
Okay, well, I think there's fault with both countries, but perhaps a bit more for Korea because of the 최순실 crisis right now. The executive branch seems to be in paralysis, and you need you need some negotiators. You need sort of a national goal to try to get these type of financial currency swaps. And I think because it's unclear who's in charge right now, they don't know what the goal is going to be. I think they've been very weak on trying to start or go further with the negotiation with this Korea-Japan currency swap. And then there has been some accusations that perhaps Japan is using this opportunity to get better deals, not necessarily on the currency swap, but on some other areas, cultural and historical. Now, from Japan's point of view, they have an option. And what I mean by option is that it's the Korea who needs the swap more than Japan. So Japan can sort of afford to act a bit more loosely than Korea. So I think there's some fault on both sides, but the main fault, I think, is that Korea does not have the momentum right now because of the political vacuum.
Now, right now, Korea also doesn't have a currency swap deal in place with the United States. And some experts are saying that this could lead to the U.S. to think Korea as a currency manipulating country.
Okay, well, the problem is that, because Korea does not have a currency swap with the United States, and because most of Korea's foreign dealings and borrowings are in dollars, Korea needs to have a very large pool of dollar reserves. And the only way to build up dollar reserves is nationally to continue to have current and capital account surpluses, and then for the government to buy those dollars from the foreign exchange rate market. You'd actually need both. And because of that, because the government is buying the dollars, it can strengthen the dollar and weaken the Korean won, and that could seem like we're manipulating the currency. But the Fed seems to be very reluctant to give currency swaps to most countries, including Korea, because, if there's a financial crisis and they need to swap their dollars for, say, Korean won, that means the global supply of dollars is expanded, and the expansion may be outside the Fed's control. So they seem to be very reluctant about signing currency swaps.
Now, China has been signing more currency swap deals with countries and regions with financial difficulties to promote its currency to foreign investors. Has China seen any substantial results from doing this?
Okay, I think they've seen a lot of diplomatic goodwill. And I think it will be helpful to a lot of these countries. But currency swap in Chinese RMB is not as useful as currency swap in US dollars because, most global transactions take place with US dollars. So if you have a currency swap with RMB, then you would get the yuan rather than US dollars, then you would need to exchange that in the foreign exchange market for dollars. So it's good that you have it. It's a thing you can fall back on, but it's not as useful as a US dollar currency swap.
Now, I mean, some have said, though, that currency swaps have had little impact on Korea as the results have not been that significant. So what are your thoughts on this?
Okay, so the ironic thing is that the better currency swap and higher reserves you have, less likely you are to use it. Now, with the currency reserves, that is a problem because that's a lot of money that the government can use, which it cannot touch. They can use this money to, say, finance infrastructure or welfare payments, but they can't because they need to keep this money in check. With currency swap, you don't need that because you only draw on it when you need it.
Right.
So ideally, if we could get a currency swap in dollars with United States or some other countries, and then we can reduce some of the current reserves, and we can use that money for, say, welfare payments.
All right. Thank you so much for your insight today.
Thank you.
And that wraps it up for today. Thanks for watching, and we'll be back tomorrow with more business news that matters to you. Until then, goodbye.